Alright, hey guys, I wanted to talk to you today about learning from experience. So, this kind of just popped up in my head, and I've been thinking about it a lot about basically the different ways that you might actually coach someone, or you might actually learn from something, and how it applies later in your life. So, I have an experience basically with how I'm unconsciously coaching. So, I don't think there was like a real big method put into it at the start of when I started doing it. So, when I first started doing like one-on-one coaching for swimming and League of Legends, and then now Overwatch and helping people just in general, like teams after. I think my style originated from how I learned myself and how like I equated success with learning and how those different things like coordinated with each other. So when I'm thinking back now, I think I really unconsciously did this, where maybe I need to like put more conscious thought into what I was actually doing. So the biggest thing I'm thinking of right now is how I unconsciously was more harsh, aggressive, whatever you want to say, more upfront with people, and I equated that to success and like that being the more superior style. Because when I'm thinking back now, I was a competitive swimmer for how long now? 7 years. That I'd said I would. I did it like very actively. Didn't really take any breaks. It was pretty much 7 years. Started to taper off near the end, but it was basically that 7 year block. So what are the years exactly? Probably like 9 to 16. Do the math right there. Then I start to taper off at the end of when I'm about to turn 17. I think that makes sense. Yeah. So when I had started to move here, or before I moved here to the States, I lived in Canada and I did a swimming course, but it's not the same as it's been here in the States. It was much more loose. It was more of like a lifeguarding coaching thing where I wasn't taken as seriously. We hardly ever swum laps. It was like a lap here or there. It was a lot of diving, having fun. It wasn't as aggressive. Um, yeah, it was more so fun and like a lot more talking and doing like very casual things. And so it wasn't taken as seriously, but that would be considered the same thing because I went to like a swimming lesson because I was swimming with other people and there was someone there to teach us and who was getting paid. And then whenever we moved to the States, whenever I was 9, it changed completely because there was no of that for that age. It was, hey, there's this pool here, we don't do anything casual here. You swim laps for the whole 2 hour block, or however long it was, hour 30, I think, back when I was like 9 and 10. And then it started to move up, like time wise. And then I was like, this is completely foreign to me. I never used to swim this much. I used to swim and I know how to swim. But for them, it was, yeah, we have a coach here and you just swim laps the whole time. That's all you do. Like maybe you'll do like a different drill. Maybe you won't do something like in the pool, like you'll do crunches or like run, but besides that you basically just swim the whole time. And so it was like a really foreign concept to me, and it made that stark difference because before I was having more fun and it was more casual and it was much easier whenever we lived in Canada for my swim lessons, but it wasn't hard and it really didn't teach me any swimming ethics. And like I could swim competently, like I could stay above the water, but that doesn't really mean much. Like, I wasn't ever going to get to a competitive level, or I wasn't ever going to be able to be the best swimmer ever doing that. Like, that was very casual, no muscle growth or anything like that. Then, whenever I start to do here, I start to have a more aggressive coach. He wasn't so much mean. I'd say one of them was like somewhat mean. I'd say just way more strict. And whenever I started, it was like really tough for me because I'd never swam that much before, and so I was slacking behind. There was a lot of people passing me. I was getting told all the time, "You're going too slow. You need to pick up the pace." I was getting tired much more easily because I didn't have that same stamina built up over time that a lot of the other people had done, that they had for years potentially, even if they're the same age as me. And so I think I just learned from the start there that your style in which you're like learning from can also affect your success, which I know sounds obvious to a lot of people, but like you take two very stark differences and you can see the output immediately. Like it doesn't equal, one doesn't equal better than the other, it just equals different results. So, and I also had fun, and there was a social concept there with the second one where we did try much harder, but it took up more time. It definitely was much more serious. I definitely had to like have a diet plan and like had to think about like what I was going to eat and what plan my day around how much I was going to be swimming, because it ended up taking up more time where I'd do night and morning, and then sometimes I was doing like middle of the afternoon as well because I was coaching or I was swimming, and so like I had to plan my days around swimming all the time because it at some points got up to like 6 or 7 hours every day, where it was just swimming or going to coming from swimming. So I think that style of like learning from your experiences. So when it was more difficult, I definitely felt more successful because I was competing at something and I was putting forth a lot of effort to getting good at something. Where I think if I just would have casually done like a swim class like that, where I wouldn't have built up as much strength, it might have been more social. There's a different aspect to it where it isn't taken as seriously. I'm not going to get the same accolades. I'm not going to feel as successful as if I'm a more competitive person and I'm doing the more competitive thing. So I think I've converted that over, and I think I was being maybe too aggressive and too tough on people, especially whenever the environment wasn't like meant for that. But I think that's also what like drew my strength from was basically if I'm tough, especially on myself, then I'll be able to learn, I'll be able to get like a very good knowledge, and then if I basically just like give that to the players, like that same formula of just try really hard, make this a super serious environment, you'll improve very quickly. That might work, but that doesn't necessarily work for every single situation where sometimes you do have to take a step back and you do have to be a less serious, engaging person where maybe the situation that you're in doesn't warrant that. Where yes, during practice maybe you can be like that, but after practice sometimes you need to change that role, change your tune, do something different, maybe compensate and deal with a person better. But it felt like for swimming there wasn't really ever that, and for a lot of sports. And so maybe I'm equating it too much to the physical thing where there was a lot of physical strain where if you did get tired, if you did have an emotional breakdown and you weren't as like capable to deal with that, then I equated that to the hardness, and you just got to deal with it and you got to get over it. And if you said no, then you were just off the team, and or you just didn't do the practice, and then you weren't going to get that successful finish that you wanted because you were competing for it and like racing for it and training yourself. And if you were just going to show up to the practices and be lazy, then why are you even there? Just leave, go do something else because this is taken much more seriously. But I think that's like kind of the thing that was set up from the beginning, and it's really hard to like implement that structure onto people who feel like they already have something else. So for me, I had to willingly accept this. I could have done something else, but I willingly accepted to join this and then started to get into swimming at a much higher level. And some people, they feel like if you just implement this coaching structure onto them and they felt like, hey, what was working before was fine. We were just taking a little bit more casual. We were laughing in scrims. We were having fun. We didn't really care as much. We were still winning. Then maybe they'll assume that to be the most optimal method because it's the most fun for them and the most pleasurable. But the better, I'd say more effective system majority of the time is going to be the tougher one, is going to be the one you don't enjoy all the time. You got to make cuts. You got to make sacrifices. Sometimes it's not going to be fun. Sometimes you're going to have someone being mean to you, telling you you're making mistakes, trying to fix your mistakes, and that's not going to be the most fun as if it was just your friends laughing, having fun, having a good time. You can do that later, but sometimes there's got to be a focus on, hey, this is the mistakes we're making at the time. Got to work on those. If you aren't working on them, then I'm going to point them out. You're going to feel insulted in front of your friends, but that's what's got to happen. Otherwise, you're not going to learn from them. So, personally, I felt like that was the best way for me to learn. I think all the coaches that gave me the most constructive criticism and were very harsh to me would either, I think the yelling is like more sports because there's definitely more adrenaline and more like testosterone and things coming around. So like I've definitely been yelled at a lot with swimming, even if I was felt like I was doing good. Where if I'm not swimming enough, if I'm not swimming fast enough, if I was ever late, there's definitely more emotions flying there. Where I feel like in esports you definitely have to tone it down a bit more because everyone's on mics. The volume level can't be controlled. Some people have different volumes as well. Some people, they've not really had that sports background, so you can't expect them to have that same level of degree of like can accept criticism. Like a lot of them, this might potentially be their first sports related thing that they've ever done, so they've never really been in any competitive discipline, so it might be very difficult for them. So it's just things to consider. learning from your experience, there's different things that can affect you. I think the best way that I've learned, and it feels like the best way that I've been able to teach people, is being very harsh and very straightforward, and like telling them what they should be doing, what they should be working on has been like one of my best strengths, but it's also a weakness in the fact that I haven't been able to turn away from that. And I think being able to like use that as a tool is going to be very good for people who are less blunt, people who like to sugarcoat things. That's not their strength, and so I need someone either like that I can work with, that will be nicer, that can fix words to make them more constructive, be less straightforward, use a lot of metaphors, things like that. That will work better to explaining things, and then I can work to improve that on my own, where there's areas where you do need to be less straightforward. You do need to like hype up the crew, get people on motivated, get people in the right headspace. So there was also like a little minor thing that I also thought made me think about was yesterday. Someone was talking about, it was Sit on Twitter. He was talking about how sometimes he lacks motivation and sometimes it's hard for him to comment scrims. And then my motivation and like what exactly it made me think of was like during swimming, we wore drag suits. And so drag suits are, you normally just wear streamlined suits where they're just tight to the body and then it's really easy to swim in them. But we'd wear like these baggy suits that were specifically made to slow you down in the pool, and they'd like catch water and they'd be really fat and they'd puff up whenever you're swimming, so they'd really slow you down. And so you just had to put that much more effort into actually swimming. So you'd take your normal strokes and then you'd feel like, hey, this is like my normal speed, but then you put the drag suit on and it'd feel like you're swimming like a slug. But what it did teach us was basically we had to exert that much more energy to go the same pace that we were going before. So it trained our body to go even faster than it would. Then whenever we took them off, then when we put like our speed suits on that were even faster than like our normal suits that we'd use to practice in, we'd like glide through the water and it feels so good, and it felt like we had that much more air in us, and it felt that much easier to like exert that amount of strength for the race that was a lot limited in time. So like you'd only swim like very aggressively for a minute, rather than in practice you'd swim with the drag suit for like potentially 2.5 hours with only like, I don't know, 10 minutes if that on the wall, like actually like breathing and taking a break and drinking water and stuff like that. So there's definitely more that you learn from practicing harder and like practicing where it hurt and it didn't feel as good and it was definitely harder, but it made the end goal a much easier and it felt much more attainable, where you can basically take the training weights off, and then once they're off, things just they flow so much easier. So that was just the thing I was thinking of. That's it.